Welcome to Jewish Cinémathèque, where we meet some of the important faces involved with films that tackle aspects of the Jewish experience. Today I'm joined by writer, director, and producer Yoav Potash, whose film Among Neighbors combines hand-drawn animation, piercing interviews, and historical footage for a stunning examination of a small, rural Polish town where Jews and Catholics lived side by side for centuries prior to World War II.
The first time my family went to my grandfather's hometown in Poland, I was 14.
The firehouse used to be the synagogue.
I remember my childhood as a wonderful period.
We started taking pictures, and then all of a sudden we were approached by two men grabbing for the cameras. Our translator turned to us and said, "They know you're Jews, we need to leave now." And I knew this town has something to hide.
Był pogrom tutaj w Niewoszewie?
Zabijania?
Było zabijanie Żydów przez Polaków?
There is nothing stronger than a witness.
Widziałam, jak ich rozstrzelali.
Gdzie, ale...
Tam. Byli sąsiadami. Się przyjaźniliśmy z nimi.
I could not imagine what the Polish people did to me. That came for me. And then a miracle happened.
No, miałam 15 lat wtedy. Ja Janka szukam. Że przeżył.
Ładny chłopak był.
They were dangerous times.
I komu pierwszemu pani opowiedziała?
A wam pierwszym.
These last 25 years, there's been growing research about what happened when, after the war, survivors of the Shoah returned home to their communities, where, in some situations, atrocities took place. And since 2018, the Polish government, with a new law, has tried to exonerate the nation of any role in the murder of 3 million Jews during the war, and has made it a crime to say or write otherwise. What Potash does in his compelling film is keep us on the edge of our seats as we learn more and more. Yoav, welcome to Jewish Cinémathèque.
Thank you, Eric. Happy to be here.
So, how did this film evolve? Is there a personal connection with the Holocaust? Was there a family member in Poland or what?
Well, it all began for me in 2014 when some colleagues of mine, Anita Friedman and her family, including her son Aaron Tartakovsky, invited me to go to Poland because they were rededicating what had been the Jewish cemetery in their ancestral shtetl, Anita's father's hometown, Aaron's grandfather's hometown.
Where in Poland? North?
It's kind of in the southeast quadrant of Poland, and it's a tiny, tiny speck of a town where most Polish people I've met have never ever heard of it. And it took me about a year to learn how to pronounce it.
I didn't even try.
Yeah, it's got a lot of consonants. It's long, but part of the reason why is because I was hearing it different ways, and in fact, the Poles call it Gniewoszew, and Jews call it Gniewoszew. So I was hearing these two different names because the Jews who used to live there called it, Gniewoszew in this kind of Yiddish way that they developed of pronouncing the name, while the Poles pronounced it their own way. And it really is sort of a tale of two cities, or a tale of two towns, in the sense that it's one town, but there were two different people there, two different faiths coexisting for hundreds of years, mostly peacefully. But what I uncovered was that peace had fractures in it. And then, of course, everything was turned upside down.
There were, what, about 50-50 in terms of percentages?
Even a little in favor of, or with there being a slightly larger Jewish population. And like many small towns, it was even the layout of the town, you could see this separation. The Jews lived around the market square because they were primarily the shopkeepers and merchants. And the Poles were primarily farmers, so they lived in this sort of larger ring of the bagel, so to speak, out with more land to work. And they interacted, they traded. They were neighbors. They were friendly with one another for the most part, and knew each other by first names. And those were the stories I started to hear, because what happened after Anita and Aaron invited me to this town, they really invited me to film this ceremony that they were doing. And I just kind of instinctively said, if you're going to bring me all the way to Poland, how about I'll spend a few extra days in this town and poke around, try to talk to the old people who live there to see what they remember about their Jewish neighbors, who of course are no more. There's not a Jew living in the town anymore. And initially, it was just to put some context around that ceremony that I was planning to film. But what happened is during the first set of interviews with all these different elders in the town, some of them were willing to admit to the crimes that occurred after the war, meaning the murder of Holocaust survivors.
Admit to witnessing or admit to actually committing?
No, of course, just admitting that they happened, that's a big admission.
What year is this? This is 2012?
This is 2014.
2014.
So it's before this, the Polish government passed a law really trying to silence those kinds of stories, but nonetheless, there was kind of a code of silence in the town, and to some extent in Polish society more broadly, about admitting to Polish culpability in the eradication of Jewish life. And so hearing those testimonies firsthand from a Polish elder who was alive at the time.
Captured by you on video?
Yes.
So they were willing to do this and have it out there.
Yeah, and the reluctance, I think, also came through. I mean, the main person who was the first to tell me about this was a woman who, in the film, you probably just start to think of her as the woman in the doorway. Her name's Janina Jaworska, but her whole interview, she really literally stood in her doorway, because we had knocked on her door, asked her if we could film, and she sort of hemmed and hawed and never invited us in, but also never told us to go away, and eventually just started talking right there. And it was almost as if she wanted to be able to, at any moment, just pull the door shut and hide. But also, a lot of these Polish elders, what I experienced was they saw me as a kind of maybe Jewish ambassador, or at least a vessel for these memories they had of Jewish people. And so many of these memories were fond memories of how we used to play in the street before the war, and going to the Jewish shops and getting the candy and the ice cream from the Jewish shopkeepers. And they really, I think, cherished the chance to walk down memory lane and reminisce about this time when there were so many Jewish children running in the streets with them. Because, of course, by this point, the only people alive to talk to were people who were children during World War II and before. When
you were interviewing them, was it just you? Did you have a crew?
I needed a crew because I don't speak Polish.
So that in itself is very frightening. I mean, it wasn't just one person, one-on-one having a conversation. You had a camera person there, you had a sound person there, I would imagine.
It depends on which shoot day. I mean, initially it was really just me and another person because for one, I didn't have the grand ambitions I later had for this story, but also it, as you hinted at, it can be off-putting to show up at someone's door with 5 or 6 people. So just me and 1 or 2 Polish people were accompanying me on these early adventures. Now, that admission that I heard about, that Jews were murdered here well after the war, Holocaust survivors were killed in this town, not by Nazis, but by Poles.
After the war.
After the war, it really struck me, and was the first of basically 3 big rebirths that this production went through. Because at that point, this first rebirth, I said to myself, this is a bigger story here than the ceremony at the cemetery. This town has a dark secret, and I can make, at the time I thought initially it was going to be maybe a half-hour documentary about this town's dark secret. And the next rebirth occurred a year later, because what happened was over the course of that year, I was becoming somewhat obsessed with this town and looking for records and photos of this tiny town, which is not a very well documented place because it's so small. But the staff at the various organizations that deal with these kinds of records got to know me and got to know, oh, there's this Jewish American filmmaker, he's kind of obsessed with Gniewoshaw. And lo and behold, one day, the Jewish Historical Institute in Warsaw gets a handwritten letter from an old woman saying, when I was a child, I spent much of my childhood in a town called Gniewoshaw. I saw the murder of Jews there after the war. I want to tell you my story, and I want you to help me find the boy of the murdered family who I know survived.
Well, let me stop you here. So, is this because you had been in that town earlier and she had heard about you, or just out of the blue?
Out of the blue. And she had her own reasons. This, of course, is a woman named Pelagia, who is one of our 2 main characters in the film. And she, at that time, at the age of 85, really stepped up her desire to tell her story.
Was this sort of a wish that before I die I want to absolve myself of my sins or whatever? Or?
Well, I think a couple main reasons. One is just knowing her time is limited on this earth.
Her mortality, yeah.
But the second was, she witnessed these murders. She was the closest eyewitness to them.
As a child?
As a child. By the time these murders took place, she was 15 years old. And why did she wait until she was 85 to tell the story? Was because that's when she found out that the killers were finally dead.
Whoa.
That they had passed away. And finally, she felt they couldn't come after her. Because in fact, they did threaten her shortly after the murders took place. And they told her, essentially, listen, squirt, you speak up, the same thing can happen to you. And she took that threat very seriously, and nonetheless wanted and was aching all her life to know what happened to that boy, and will I get a chance to tell him what I know, what I saw, because as traumatic as it is, she had an instinct that he would want to know exactly what happened to his parents if he's still alive.
Now, in translating this to cinema, you did something quite unique. You decided to use animation. Can you talk about those choices?
Sure. I mean, her story, once it started really unpacking itself for me, I realized it was really, really rich and really detailed. And I tried for a while to tell her story using archival footage and just her interview and just sort of moody shots of this little town. And I was just finding that it's not getting us there, and there's so much specificity and richness and depth in all of her memories. To give you one example, she talks about before the war, seeing their fabric shop, the Jewish neighbors across the street, and how much she admired not only the neighbors, but the shop itself with the beautiful fabrics. Then, during the war, she described sneaking into what had now become the Jewish ghetto in the town, which included that fabric shop, which now had like 40 Jews crammed inside of it, living there in squalid conditions. And when she did make that visit, the mother of that household that had owned and operated the fabric shop gave her a piece of fabric. And
Just as a present, just like that.
Yeah, as a present, and as a kind of gift, something to remember us by. And she treasured that fabric so much that Pelagia took it, and when they had to flee Gnivishev because the front line was coming through, she buried it in a tin to hide it so she could dig it up after the war, which she did. And she found it and she made it into a dress. So there was just such a strong narrative arc, and that's just one aspect. That's just sort of the fabric thread, if you'll pardon the pun. But the richness and kind of inherent symbolism within that just felt to me like the audience needs to see that. They need to understand how much this meant to this girl, and we need to be with her. So we did a test initially, an animation test, and put together several scenes with animation. It was just one animator at that point, and I showed it to an audience in Berkeley, California, and they loved it. They said it was really working well, it was helping them follow the story, that the animation was really striking.
And here's a clip from the film Among Neighbors, a film by Yoav Potash.
Ale w porządku dzieci były. Chowanego się bawiliśmy.
3, 4,
Zawsze szukam Janka Weinberga.
7, 8, 9, 10. Szukam.
When the war started in September 1939, I was 6 years old. Poland was conquered very quickly by the Germans. I still remember the Germans arriving in Gnivishev. Immediately after they arrived, they started to rob Jewish shops and hit the Jewish people in the streets. All the atmosphere changed catastrophically. It was like we were not human beings.
Bo Niemcy wszystko zagarniali.
Wtedy wszystkich spędzili, tak zebrali?
Tak, zewsząd. Samochody przywozili non-stop. Postawili im takie betonowe słupki i kolczastym drutem, proszę panią, oni grodzili.
And so, I dove in further and deeper with the animation to the point where that one poor animator was totally overwhelmed, and I realized, okay, I need to find a crew.
Right.
Yes, and really people who specialize in this, and so we did, and then I was moving forward, making this film now with her at the center. So this was, as I said, the film got reborn 3 times.
So this is your second reiteration. You went back to Poland to meet her.
Yes, we filmed interviews with her. We, started animating her story from top to bottom. And the initial group of Polish elders who I had filmed with kind of became like a Greek chorus around her. And also the story of the Friedman family was still, a kind of a Jewish American complement to all of that, because this is the story of them trying to visit the place of their ancestors and just get some kind of acknowledgement or meaning out of being able to walk the streets where they used to have hundreds and hundreds of relatives.
This is the granddaughter and her son.
The daughter.
The actual daughter
and yes.
and her
so
son.
Second generation, a 2G and a 3G, as we say, right?
Okay.
And as I was nearing completion of that film,
We're looking at what, 2016?
now it's 2018.
Okay.
So I spent like 3 years, really focusing on Pelagia's story and animating it and
Which
so on.
you got major funding to be able to do.
We got decent funding.
Good.
Thank goodness.
Okay.
It's certainly very small budget by Hollywood standards, but by documentary standards, yeah, we do
Enough to cover your trips and back and forth.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, enough to get the job done.
Okay.
So as I was finishing that film, or thought I was finishing that film, I actually looked back at the printed program of that first day in the town, which was the ceremony, right, to rededicate the cemetery. And on the cover of that program was some artwork by a painter who and the caption even said that this is by someone named Harry Lieberman, who was from Gneveshev himself. So it's a memory painting of a shtetl by someone who lived in the shtetl.
Shtetl, by the way, is the way to. It's a small market town.
Yeah, small Eastern European Jewish village.
Usually in Poland.
Yeah.
But could have been anywhere in Eastern Europe.
Sure. I mean, if you think of it like a Fiddler on the Roof kind of town, Anatevka or Gneveshev, it feels more or less the same. So this painting of the shtetl made me think a little bit more about the man who painted it. And I did a little more research. There was actually a book written about him. And he's someone who only began painting as an old man. And all these paintings, these images of his childhood in Gneveshev are what came out. And those were really special because Jewish life was so utterly destroyed that his paintings were a kind of time capsule. So I thought, let's make a scene about this painter. We'll find a way to work it into the film. And as I was doing that, I got in contact with his granddaughters, and they are the ones who told me, it's great that you're making, a scene about Grandpa, but do you know we have a living relative, a cousin of ours, who's a Holocaust survivor from Gneveshev, and he can give you direct testimony. And so that was tremendously exciting for me.
Living where?
Living in Israel.
In Israel.
So that put me on a plane to Israel to go meet Yakov Goldstein, who...
This is reiteration 3.
And this is the beginning of reiteration 3, because I quickly found out that Yakov Goldstein has an amazing story. And
Some of which we're going to let our viewers not know about.
Yes. We won't spoil anything. But I knew he was a Holocaust survivor. I knew he was from the town. I knew there was a lot he could tell me about how he survived and about what Jewish life in the town was like from the Jewish perspective, not only from the Polish perspective, and what surviving was like, and what coming back to the town after the war was like from a Jewish perspective. And what I'll say is, his account helps this film do its job, which is reveal some of the complexities. A lot of times, countries especially like to tell a very simple narrative about themselves, and Poland likes to tell this narrative that Poles were either victims during World War II or heroes during World War II. And nothing else, nothing more, never perpetrators, never taking advantage of situations.
Never bystanders.
Right. And of course the truth is much more complex than that, and there were many, many bystanders who, to save their own skin, chose to do nothing, and probably most people chose to do nothing. But that's not as bad as those who chose to do harm or take advantage. And one thing I can say that, you know, I don't think it's spoiling a major plot element of the film, is that Yakov survived as a hidden child. And on the one hand, the Poles who hid him saved his life.
And risked their own.
And risked their own. That's right. And that's amazing. And so there's perhaps an instinct to say, those people are heroes. But on the other hand, as Yakov describes, the way they hid him was they put him in a little sort of box above, kind of a little, what they call in Yiddish, a boiden, I think. But it's a little cubby, and a little hole, essentially, in the apartment. And had him live there without sunlight, without bathing, the ability to bathe, for 2 years. And they did it for money, because they were being paid by Yakov's parents to hide him. So, are they so heroic? Maybe yes, maybe no. The audience can draw their own conclusion about it, but it seems that he was hidden in an inhumane way. And in fact, the individual of the family who probably treated him with the most humanity was the daughter, who was roughly his own age, because she brought him books every few days, a new book from the library. And that, as Yakov says in the film, kept him from losing his mind, from just going crazy.
And yet he survived.
And yet he survived. That much you know, because I got to talk to him. But he just had an absolutely harrowing story, and it was then a natural step to say, let's animate his story as well. And from an artistic point of view, as well as a production point of view, I chose to use a different team of animators to animate his story, so that literally Pelagia's memories and Yakov's memories would be drawn by two different hands in a way to symbolically or subconsciously tell the audience, yes, we all remember in our own way, in our own style. And their stories kind of weave together, and we track them both before the war, during the war, after the war. And so discovering Yakov meant sort of reinventing the film a third and, thank goodness, final time. But I took apart this entire construction that I had made so that it could be put back together with Yakov's story fully integrated.
You showed this film in Warsaw after 2018.
Yes.
How was it received? Did you have any pushback of any kind?
I've not had much pushback.
Because there were a lot of Polish filmmakers who had a lot of problems with films that dealt with similar subjects.
Yes, and we may still have some problems, but so far our screenings in Poland have been in what you might think of as Jewish safe spaces. The Polin Museum of the History of Polish Jews in Warsaw, that was where we had our world premiere at the Warsaw Jewish Film Festival that was held there, and the film won a prize that was awarded by TVP, which is a Polish television network. So that was very nice, because they're not a Jewish organization in any way, and they saw the value in this film and bestowed it this honor. And then it's been shown at the Krakow Jewish Culture Festival. Hopefully soon it will be reaching even a much broader audience in Poland, as well as here in the United States. I worked really hard to try to make this film in a way where it can really be universal and appeal to any viewer who is, relatively mature, which in my mind is like this film is for essentially 7th grade and older.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And because I know that there is a perception around Holocaust films and a lot of resistance to, do we need to watch another Holocaust film?
That's the reaction by many.
And really this film is it's a post-Holocaust film in that the most significant tragedies that the film details occurred after the war. And you know that was within the first few minutes of the film. Pelagia, we kind of tease that she witnessed these crimes after the war. And so you know that's where you're going. But we take you step by step to get there. And we also show how it relates to today, to the Polish government trying to silence these stories. And in the broader sense, I think it makes audiences see parallels between Poland and many other countries where someone is trying to shape the narrative to say, oh, we can't admit this part of our history or that part of our history.
Right. One of the elements that you introduce, and you sort of play with it, is a stolen gravestone that you find in the home of this father and son.
Yes.
So the father clearly is from that older generation and the son not, and they have this gravestone. And we know that many of the gravestones and cemeteries all across Poland have been taken, used for roads, used whatever, for carpentry, for
build a
masonry
well,
or whatever, build a well.
Set of steps,
and you do show that to some extent. But why did you decide, and really, does this say something about Poland? And this is really the last question I ask you is, why did you decide, what message did you want us to get from that?
Well, that was something that really happened in an organic and unplanned way, the discovery of this tombstone. I mean, what literally happened is we interviewed this old man, Henryk Smolarczyk, and his son was always around when we interviewed him. His son lived with him and took care of him, and also really had a desire to talk to the camera himself. In fact, we had a lot of footage with him that we didn't use. But we went back to their house only because we needed some more B-roll, right? We needed more footage of Henryk, the old man, doing something aside from sitting and talking to us. Because I realized in the editing room, oh, we barely have anything to cut to with this guy. And it would be helpful to just have some footage of him doing something around his house. So we went back to them months after we had first filmed with them and said, hey, we need, we explained what we needed. And they said, oh, let's go out back. Grandpa has his garden out back. And we follow Grandpa down the side of the house. And this is literally the first shot of the film. You're following an old man walking down beside a house, and you notice there's junk everywhere. It's like a scrap yard in their backyard. And we walk past all of these car parts and broken fans and just odds and ends and scrap metal. And finally he arrives on the other side of the yard where there's a few flowers that he has planted in this little area where he's moved away the junk. And while we were back there filming that, my cameraman just, elbowed me in the ribs and pointed at a Jewish tombstone that was just lying there as yet another piece of junk that they had.
What a statement about the state of Polish Jewry. Yoav, thank you so much for joining us. This was absolutely terrific. The film is Among Neighbors. It's not just a film about the Shoah, it's a film about today. And it's a film you must go see. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it.